Teal dear, can you hear that distant sound rolling over the hills? That is the sound of Landwhales having their poor life's decisions validated by shaming normal and underweight people, no less. Let's go and have a read of an article, shall we? From motherboard.vice.com, and a rather worrying number of other websites who have also picked up on this story, unsurprisingly all of them from the very progressive part of the media. But we're going to focus on this one particular iteration of this story because there are a couple of points in here that I find most amusing. Lara Croft gets a realistic makeover from eating disorder support group. Bulimia.com, an organization supporting people struggling with eating disorders, is calling attention to unrealistic and potentially damaging body images depicted in gaming by reverse photoshopping some of its famous characters. You don't really reverse Photoshop something that wasn't Photoshopped to start with, but whatever, semantics. Unrealistic body image depictions are a well-established problem in fashion and advertising where camera, makeup, and photoshopping tricks can create an ideal that is literally impossible, and sometimes horrifying. Video games aren't scrutinized as often, but considering that game developers are overwhelmingly male, and that the female bodies they're designing are completely malleable and don't adhere to the basic laws of physics, it's not surprising we get characters that look like Bayonnetta. Ah yes, the first complaint about the infamous boob jiggle physics nonsense that keeps coming up all the time. This idea that, oh, if breasts move in a video game, it's because the people coding the game are sexist and don't know how boobs work. It's funny how these sorts of complaints come from people who have no idea how to rig and animate 3D models. Go to any sort of 3D rigging and animation forum and you will find numerous threads talking about not only things like breast physics, but also physics of fat for overweight people with large guts, and hair physics as well, and often physics of other more mundane things such as sheets of cloth or fabric or curtains. And that's before we consider other even more difficult things to animate, such as realistic fluid and liquid movements for things like bodies of water. Physics is just something that is very difficult to get right in a 3D environment, and is something that will often require a lot of trial and error to get just right, which is why companies such as Cyflex exist. Cyflex being a company that focuses exclusively on the simulation of realistic cloth movement and skin motion. Body physics and environmental physics improve as technology improves. There is nothing sexist about it. It is simply working around technological limitations. And finally, we come to the obvious point here. Bayonnetta. You talk about how game developers and gamers are overwhelmingly male and make female characters who defy the laws of physics exclusively to titillate males, and then you provide possibly the most famous example of a sexualized female character that was developed by a woman, by the name of Marie Shimazaki. And if you go over to the developer website, Platinum Games, you can actually find several posts written by her where she quite meticulously details the aesthetic choices that she made whilst designing Bayonnetta as a character. Some game studios boast their hyper-realistic lighting techniques, touting natural cloud movements as the latest features of their games. Bulimia.com wrote in a post on its website, and with that kind of attention to detail, it makes us wonder, why can't they accurately portray the female body? Well, the simple answer is apples and oranges. Rendering a light source has absolutely nothing to do with animating a three-dimensional model. One is a simple sequence of numbers put into a light rendering engine in order to affect changes within an environment. The other is the creation of a mesh for a model, the creation of a skeleton for that model, and then the envelopment of that mesh to that skeleton. It's a very difficult process to explain to people who have not actually had to do it. But there is an excellent video here on YouTube by Francis Schmidt who explains the basics of enveloping a rig to a model within Softimage XSI. And I'm also including a link to another video by Chris Maynard who takes you through the same program, Softimage, formerly known as XSI, talking about lighting and rendering passes. And when you watch both of these videos, you will notice just how incredibly different these two processes are, and why trying to compare one to the other is laughable. But here's a quick snippet from each, which I think both highlight suitably just how different these processes are.
This is what's supposed to control my rig, just that white stuff, nothing else. So when I select that, I get all the right stuff that I need to do that. I'm going to unhide my character now, H, like that. So when I want to attach it all, attach this geometry to that rig, I select the rig, like I did right there. I go under the animate bar to envelope, set envelope. I'm going to hit yes to this. You just always hit yes to this. And then I pick what is going to control what. I click the envelope group. And if you look on the bottom, it will say the right mouse button ends the picking. I'm going to click my right mouse button. And that is the assignment. What's happened is it takes every bone and it gives them a color. And then the points are controlled by the color. Now in this case, I'm defaulting to 2 skeletal objects, meaning if I have a point right here on my arm, for example, it would be controlled by the bone over here, which, in this case is yellow, and the bone over here, which in this case is blue.
With the basics covered, we'll learn about all the different types of lights in self-image and what are their counterparts in the real world, so we can make conscious decisions in our process. We'll also learn about light's properties like fall-off and shadow softness. We'll then apply all this knowledge to our scene, using lights as a creative tool to fill our environment with mood. With a good-looking final image, it is important to know all the options that are available for us to output them, and how they can help us optimize our rendering workflow. To finish it off, we'll investigate both render channels and render passes, 2 different and powerful ways of sending extra information to the compositing stage or optimizing our work. We'll even take a quick look at Softimage's built-in compositor, also known as the effects tree, and how it can help previewing our passes.
So yeah, apples and oranges comparison. As for why they are difficult to animate, well, it's simply a matter of technological limitation. Why did the first humans animated by Pixar suck compared to the animation now? Why did they not feature animated hair, whereas animated hair is quite frequent in films now? And the answer is technological limitation. The programs that they were using simply did not have that function built into them at the time because it was not something that was needed. It was not something that was even considered to have been needed. It's like saying, why did early television broadcasts not have transparent overlays on top of the moving background images? The answer is because the technology didn't exist to do that yet. There's nothing about sexism or misogyny in it at all. It's simply technological limitation. As technology improves, animation quality improves. Simple as that. And now we come to one of my favorite points in this entire article. After giving superheroes the same treatment back in March, the organization redesigned characters like Halo's Cortana, Tekken 5's Christy Monteiro, and Mortal Kombat's Jade to represent the average American woman's measurements. And rather conveniently, they have provided us with a link to a study conducted by the CDC, and this part provides you with a reasonable breakdown from part of a larger study that was conducted through 2007 to 2010 called the Anthropometric Reference Data for Children and Adults in the United States. And as you can see, they just give you the mean height, weight, and waist circumference of men and women. And this is where things get funny. Because from the very same website, the CDC, obesity and overweight individuals data from the US, taken from a study called The Prevalence of Overweight and Obesity Among Children and Adolescents in the United States, from 1963 to 1965 through to 2011-2012. And in this, you will find that a whopping 69% of American adults are overweight or obese. And the reason that I find this hilarious, and we're going to start looking at some of the images from this article now because it kind of proves the point. This is not showing people who suffer from things like bulimia and anorexia what a healthy weight is. This is in fact glorifying obesity. And what blows my mind is that a bulimia charity doesn't seem to understand how damaging something like this could be to someone who is anorexic or has bulimia. Because what this is doing is basically putting a mountain in front of them and saying, climb it, and then you will be normal. instead of, having the healthy approach to it, like giving them smaller goals that are easier to achieve and a realistic expectation at the end. Because what you're doing here is you are pedestalizing overweight and obese people, which is simply going to push people who have anorexia and bulimia even further into their condition, because they are going to look at these people and think, well, my God, they're massive, and it's going to make them feel even worse about trying to get there, and yet you are pushing this as the average. And then the thing that makes me laugh even more about this is they've only done it for female video game characters. You couldn't resist pushing in the heteronormal societal pressure on women's bodies angle, could you? And the reasons that this angle sickens me even more is kind of twofold. First of all, when you look at the women in these video games, there actually are women who have those body shapes, as you can see here, and here, and here, and here. Need I go on? These bodies are therefore usually not actually unachievable, and even if they are, so what? It's fiction. They are not real. I don't see people running around trying to shrink their bodies and expand their craniums so they can look like a fucking wee-me. If you want it to be true of female video game characters saying, oh, it gives people a warped perception of what a real woman should look like, then you have to accept that that's what all video game characters do, including stupid ones like wee-me's. And then let's look at the idealized standards of men in video games, shall we? Yeah, totally realistic. Absolutely achievable. I mean, as long as you don't mind spending 2 or 3 hours every single day in a gym watching your diet meticulously and abusing steroids and growth hormones, then sure, we can all look like that. And the issues that I take with this is not only that it is actually quite directly harmful to the people that this charity is trying to help, but it's also harmful to people who are overweight or obese, because as soon as you start telling them that being overweight is normal, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to see it as an issue, and therefore not try and maintain a healthy weight. And at this point in time, the negative health impacts of being overweight are very well established. And pieces like this, which glorify people who are overweight, which glorify obesity, only serve to put overweight people in denial about the problems that they are facing or going to face. And this denial is personified beautifully in a very famous post from This Is Thin Privilege on Tumblr, posted by Fat Anarchy, who says, thin privilege is being able to see a doctor about your knee fractures, genetic trait passed down from my mother, without being told that they are caused by your weight. I run a 4-minute mile and jog nearly 40 miles a month. I think my knees are in fine shape apart from this, and a doctor saying that I'm dangerously overweight by 150 pounds, even if being overweight was dangerous, is obviously just trying to fat shame me and make me feel bad. Thin privilege is being taken seriously by a doctor. So, you're 150 pounds overweight. That's not 150 pounds weight in total. That's 150 pounds overweight, as in on top what a normal, healthy woman should weigh. And yet, you are able to run at a pace that would rival that of the world record holder, who by odd coincidence looks like this. Yeah, I call bullshit, fatty. Girl gamers, especially young ones, could develop a skewed image of how the female body should look, bulimia.com wrote. This might mark the beginning of obsessive thoughts about their own bodies and self-questioning as to why they don't align with their perceived ideal. What you mean to say here is that you think girls are too stupid to differentiate fantasy from reality, and that they shouldn't have to care about things like their health or well-being. As we've already shown in this video, many of these characters with unrealistic proportions, as you have termed them, actually have women with those proportions in real life. So they're clearly not unachievable, nor are they in any way actually extreme. They are often just slim or slightly muscular women, the kinds of bodies that you would expect to develop from people engaged in regular physical exercise. As the organization notes, the changes are especially notable since most of the characters are half naked, which is a problem in its own right for female game characters. Is it? Is it really? You know, I'm starting to think that this article was written by a bunch of people who have never played video games ever. The reason that most of the women that you've picked are half naked is because you picked them. Anyone who actually, plays video games on a fairly regular basis will be able to point to a myriad of female characters in video games who are not half naked, who are not even anywhere near remotely naked. In fact, you will find several examples of women in video games who are top to toe in armor. And here's a question for you. Since when was being naked a problem? There is nothing wrong or shameful about the naked human form, be it female or male. If anything, the reason why people such as the author of this article and indeed the people who created these images are becoming so Puritan about nudity is because it is not something that is celebrated as much as it was historically. We no longer make great pieces of art celebrating the beauty that is the human form, or the aesthetics that it can achieve. Instead, we hide it away, and it becomes a if you can't see it, it's not a problem sort of issue. And then people get fat. And that is a great shame, I think, because it is somewhat a tragedy that some people will simply never know the beauty and strength that their body is capable of. And it's because they're too lazy to try, and then on top of that, they have a bunch of people, like the writers of this article, basically telling them that being fat is just A-okay, despite all evidence to the contrary.